All right, let's get cooking. Welcome to the latest edition of Chin Check Sports Radio. I'm your host, JD. I want to thank you all for taking the time out to join us. And as always, we welcome any suggestions, feedback, comments, and criticisms, which improves the quality of our program, which ultimately improves your listening experience. Before we get started, we want to send all of you our thank yous for your tremendous support. Again, people are slowly finding out about who we are and what we do, and they respect and appreciate the passion with which we speak. But as we stated before, we do this because we love this, and we sharing our passions with you all as we continue to build our listening army to take over the world. We had a big fight in town, and nothing is bigger than the heavyweight championship of the world. Tyson Fury against Deontay Wilder 3, the final fight of their trilogy. And needless to say, we got more than our money's worth for $80 worth, but definitely was an exciting fight. We're not going to get into what brought both fighters here because we did our preview for the fight before the original scheduled date of July 21st. Unfortunately, Tyson Fury contracted COVID-19, so the fight had to be pushed back to this current date. So though things happen, we understand. We're definitely frustrated by that because boxing had a relatively quiet year, but now with this fight coming up and other fights coming up, boxing is getting a much-needed jolt outside of jokes from the Paul brothers as well as Vitor Belfort fighting Evander Holyfield. So this is now whether this was the fight that people wanted to see. There was some reservations about that. However, the heavyweight championship of the world is the most prized possession in professional sports, as some would say. And there's nothing like a huge boxing match, a big fight, and nothing is bigger than the highest end of the scale. So that's something that people were, at least us hardcore fight fans, we knew that there was a fight again. We kind of figured the outcome, but it's still the heavyweight championship of the world. It's still a big fight. What I find funny is the mainstream media really didn't start bringing this fight up until Thursday or Friday. So that's what I really found funny about that. They really didn't jump on. If you watch Fox Sports, they started talking about the fight Thursday into Friday. So again, the mainstream media, how they view boxing, it is what it is, and that's why you have Chin Check Radio for your boxing news. My thing is, what if this rematch was not signed? Because if many of you forget, this fight wasn't supposed to happen. It went to court and the judge ruled that a fight is supposed to happen because remember, while Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua kept tap dancing around each other. Now, we don't know who's at fault for that fight not being made, but you saw Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury couldn't come to an agreement, which is really could have been the biggest fight, one of the biggest fights ever in boxing history because you would have had a unified champion. They couldn't make it happen. The judge rules that Wilder was contractually obligated to the rematch. Then Usyk steps in and fights Anthony Joshua. He beats Anthony Joshua. Go see our review of that fight. And now you have Fury Wilder 3. Now, if you go by that second fight through every metric, every analysis, Fury clearly was a heavy favorite going into this fight. There's nobody, even your hardcore Wilder fans, really had to acknowledge that Fury was a favorite into this fight by far. Why is that? Because Wilder was totally beaten up in the last fight. Fury is a more skilled puncher, and really Deontay looked out of his element. Costumes be damned, excuses be damned, Mark Bruner throwing the towel be damned. It just wasn't a good night. So now the question was going into this fight, and people asked me, the question was whether Deontay had improved his skill set enough with new trainer Malik Scott. So that was a key, whether he improved his skill set enough, which will add to his repertoire on top of his thunder right hand. And number two, once he gets hit, is he going to stick to the new game plan or revert back to the old Deontay Wilder of just trying to knock a guy out with one hand? So that was the ultimate question going into this fight. Now, as the pay-per-view fight started at 9 o'clock, I found it strange that Deontay Wilder walks into the arena really, I thought, rather late, where Tyson Fury was already in the dressing room, already doing interviews, already seemed relaxed and composed, and Wilder is now walking in, I thought, late for a fighter to make his entrance into the arena. I'm talking about suited and booted, looking good, holding his beautiful wife's hand, and walking in with his entourage and actually doing interviews as he's walking to his dressing room. So I'm wondering, where's the focus there? So then we get to the walkouts where they sang the national anthem. Deontay Wilder is not ready to walk out, so now you have a waiting period of Wilder, since he's a challenger, of walking out first, and now we're waiting to see whether he's going to come out. So I thought that was kind of strange, but hey, it was what it was. So then we get to the first round of the fight. By the way, let's backtrack a little bit. Since costumes was one of the excuses given last time, we did cover that. We did cover that in the broadcast about the excuses, and he wore a clearly a lighter costume. So we'll take that with a grain of salt. So now we go into the first round where clearly Deontay made some improvements for that one round, jabbing to the body. Now, you didn't really see him throwing body punches, and Fury looked a little bit thicker and wider in the midsection. Clearly, he had put on some weight, and Wilder, I thought he did a good job of attacking the body in the first round. I think kind of threw Fury off. Towards the end of that first round, I thought Fury caught him with a clipped right hand that got Wilder's attention, but all in all, I gave the first round to Deontay Wilder. Second round, really more of the same. Fury stepped up the attack a little bit. Wilder still was aiming to the body. I still gave the first 2 rounds to Deontay Wilder. Third round comes up. Now Fury started to pick up the pace a little bit. Scores a knockdown of Wilder in a short right hand on the inside. And at that moment, you thought that fight was over. You thought that now Deontay has tasted the canvas again, which he did in the second fight. How is he going to respond to it? Because he came out controlling the action, clearly trying to improve his skill set. The old Deontay Wilder was there. But now you wonder, was Deontay going to get knocked out? And he was out of it. I think the bell saved him just a little bit, but he got up and he soldiered on, which goes into the fourth round. With a minute left in the fourth round, Deontay Wilder throws a right hand straight down the middle, a short right hand straight down the middle that catches Fury. And you heard the impact, and it was almost as if Fury had a delayed reaction, which we have seen that in boxing. He took a step back. I don't know what he was waiting for Deontay to do, and the next thing you know, he fell forward. So Deontay Wilder, after getting pummeled in that second fight, after just getting knocked down in the third round, scores a huge knockdown against Tyson Fury. Fury is still out on his feet, still legs still weren't with him. Wilder scores another knockdown. So now Deontay Wilder, again, dominated in the second fight, knocked down in this third fight, has now scored 2 knockdowns of Tyson Fury. So that said a lot, and you kind of maybe thought that Wilder was going to knock Fury out in the fourth round, scoring 2 knockdowns. At this point, we have a fight. The crowd is going crazy. I know Fight Party is going crazy because nobody expected that. For a man who was just dropped in the third round to get up and knock Fury down twice in the fourth round, it really said a lot. And now, I didn't agree with the whole it was a slow count, because I myself counted both knockdowns and Fury clearly was up really before the count of 7 or 8. So I'm not going to say that it were a slow count. No, we're not going to do that. And even in the second knockdown, I can make an argument the reason why the referee broke the count because Wilder didn't go and stay in the neutral corner. So again, those are great knockdowns by Deontay Wilder. It was not a slow count because Fury clearly got up before the count of 10. Now, as he come out for the fifth round, they were both of a feeling out process, but then you saw Fury really starting to pull away in those 6th, 7th round, where Wilder looked out of it at really, in the later half, he was really fighting on instinct. He was really fighting on heart. He didn't have a lot behind his punches, and guess what ended up happening? He resorted back to the old Deontay Wilder. He became a headhunter, You can clearly see him telegraphing his right hand. He had abandoned strategy of body punches. There's an old saying that fatigue makes cowards of us all. And I don't want to use that term for Deontay Wilder, call himself a coward. But clearly when he was fatigued, his technique was gone. His instincts kicked in as a puncher to hopefully land something and turn the tide of the fight. And you clearly saw him trying to throw his right hand as hard as he could, but it really didn't have a whole lot on it. Maybe in one round he caught Fury with the uppercut and caught Fury's attention, but clearly Wilder just didn't have the steam on his punches, while Fury, despite his looks, seems to be the fresher fighter, the fighter with more energy, and quite frankly, better cardiovascular. Looks be damned. I don't know if the extra weight is bothering Deontay Wilder because they both weighed in at career highs. And clearly Wilder was trying to get stronger. Why? It appears he incorporated a lot of weightlifting as part of his training. I mean, he built up some good muscle, but you don't need muscles in boxing. You need skills and cardio. And clearly, again, he fought his heart out, but the skills, it just wasn't there. And I think at this time, a combination of lack of conditioning or not enough conditioning compared to Tyson Fury, and the skills that were already rudimentary at best, and it just was a recipe for disaster. Even in that knockdown in the 10th round, that was just, and I'm going to say it was a knockdown based on exhaustion, but exhaustion contributed to that knockdown because as Wilder was trying to go around Fury, trying to duck and dodge punches, his hands was literally down. Fury, being a great boxer that he is, catches him with a nice overhand right, drops him where you thought the fight was over then. And by the 11th round, clearly Wilder was out of it. Hell, the ring doctor was talking to Deontay Wilder before the 9th round. So you clearly saw there was some concern. Wilder looked dejected in his corner. He looked beaten. I mean, his head was down while his trainer was trying to talk to him. The aforementioned Malik Scott. Wilder's mouth was wide open even during the rounds. He clearly was tired. In the 11th round, he gets caught with an overhand right. Again, just hands down from just sheer exhaustion. And even when he hit the canvas, he didn't brace himself. He just fell on his side. And I knew that the fight was over and there was no point in even accounting. So Tyson Fury retains his heavyweight championship of the world with an 11-round KO of Deontay Wilder in a very action-packed fight. Now, a lot of people are giving Deontay Wilder credit for putting forth a great effort. I give him credit. I give him a lot of credit to seeming to want to make the improvements. It just wasn't enough. I'm going to give Tyson Fury a lot of credit from getting up from 2 hellacious knockdowns to pretty much coming back and dominating the rest of that fight and clearly having better stamina. So both guys fought great. Now, yes, are people going to say it's a classic fight? I'm trying to think of classic heavyweight championship fights in my lifetime. At the top of my head, I can go Riddick Bowe, 1, 2, or 3. You can pick really any one of those fights. I can look at Mike Tyson versus Evander Holyfield, 1. I was a big fan of Vitaly Klitschko and Lennox Lewis, Michael Moore and Evander Holyfield 2, Evander Holyfield and George Foreman. So a lot, believe it or not, even that fight ended up in a disqualification. Andrew Galata and Riddick Bowe won. So this definitely, where does it rank? I would have to think about that. I would really have to think about that. But I threw those other fights out there just off the top of my head about all-time great heavyweight championship matches. But again, we give both fighters credit. I'm going to give Tyson Fury a lot of credit. Again, surviving those 2 knockdowns in the 4th round, and the guy clearly was hurt. There was no questions asked. He clearly was hurt. And to get up and dominate the rest of that fight, he got his legs back, and he pretty much controlled the action the rest of the way. As for Deontay Wilder, where does he go from here? He needs to stay far away from Tyson Fury. I think we can close the book on that chapter. We don't need to see them in the ring ever again. I don't care if Deontay Wilder wins 10 straight fights and knocks every person out in the 1st round. He really shouldn't be in the ring with Tyson Fury because what he brings to the table against Tyson Fury is not enough. Do I still think he matches up well with Anthony Joshua? Yes. Do I think he matches up well with Alexander Usyk? Yes. Just not with Tyson Fury, and that's okay. Some people just have your number. What is concerning about Deontay Wilder, and I told my little brother this, Wes, I know you're listening. What I text him is that what's the question marks about Deontay Wilder has always been his skills, his skill set. Now, a question that has to be raised is, number one, is his conditioning. Because he was tired really by the 5th or 6th round where his mouth was wide open. So now, not only do we have questions about improving his skills, but if he was to try to improve his skills at this stage of his career, is conditioning going to be an issue as he continues to build muscle on his body that requires more oxygen? He didn't have a problem going a full 12 rounds where he was weighing 212, 215 pounds, but now he's weighing 230. Yeah, he looks thicker, but again, the more muscle you have, the more oxygen the body requires. So that weightlifting thing, maybe it's not working out because, again, when he was 212, 215, highest 220, he was going 12 rounds with Mr. Burns. He was going 12 rounds with Tyson Fury in the first fight, which he scored that hellacious knockdown. So clearly weighing 230 and above, I don't think is a good thing for Deontay Wilder. So, but at this stage of his career, how much can he put his body through? And again, if we're trying to improve his skill set, now conditioning is also becoming a problem for him. Secondly, this is the second fight in a row where I don't know what is the issue with Deontay Wilder's left ear and bleeding out of his left ear. First, it was a busted eardrum. Then he tried to clean it up by stating it was a cut inside the ear. Well, I don't know what happened this time, but as you saw, after the referee waved the fight off and he sat Deontay Wilder back on his stool, you clearly see the blood coming out of his ear again. So I don't know the story with that. Usually blood in the ear indicates some type of head trauma, and I mean inside of the head trauma. So that's the part that was scary to me, is that he's bleeding out of his ear again, and I know that was not a cut in the ear. There's clearly some equilibrium or busted eardrum, something inside there to cause that bleeding. And my thing is, if that's the case, where does he go from here? Does he continue to put himself in a position to be taking these punishments? Is that the bleeding in his ear? Is that from the busted eardrum was affecting his equilibrium, which is affecting his balance? These are questions that he's going to have to ask himself, and then the right team around him is going to have to face those questions, because it was sad to see a guy who was knocking everybody out just 3, 4, 5 years ago. He looked like a beaten fighter, but he looked like he gave everything that he could in that fight. His wife clearly got emotional seeing him hurt, and I totally understand that seeing your loved one hurt is definitely not the easiest thing to see. But where does he go from here? Again, he will never reach that top tier status while Fury is the top of the food chain. All right, he just won't reach that status, and that's okay. But where does he go? Does he fight the loser of Usyk versus Joshua? So that's something where him and his team would have to evaluate. As for Tyson Fury, again, great performance. I give this man all the credit in the world, from getting up from 2 hellacious knockdowns to controlling the rest of totally controlling the rest of the action. And in 3 fights with Deontay Wilder, has really separated himself from Wilder. This is after missing all that time battling depression and weight gain and drug addiction. So that really says a lot about this guy's character. Clearly, this guy's made of stone. This guy's pure heart. Antics be damned. Comedy be damned. This shows a lot about Tyson Fury, from winning the lineal heavyweight championship of the world to really falling off the wagon to building himself back up and now being on top of the world and just turning in another dominant performance against the other top challenger of his era. And again, they heard audio of the late great trainer Emanuel Stewart, which I saw years ago, how he predicted that these would be the top 2 heavyweights of the next era heavyweights. And this is a guy who should know something about heavyweights, training Oliver McCall and Lennox Lewis and Vladimir Klitschko and Evander Holyfield. So one who would know about heavyweights is a late great Emanuel Stewart, and may his soul rest in peace. So as for Tyson Fury, he should wait for the winner of the Usyk and Joshua rematch. Then there we would have a unified heavyweight champion of the world. So again, this is why we love the sport. This is what we wait on. As you see, our take is different from everybody on Twitter. We're not going to do the Twitter tough guy stuff and just totally trash Deontay Wilder. He put forth a great effort. It just wasn't enough, and the man lost a fight, and the man got knocked out with the same issue of the blood pouring from the ear, and that's a part that's concerning, as well as can he improve his skill set, which is always a question. But at this stage of his career, in his late 30s, improving his skill set on top of conditioning and cardio becoming an issue are things that people really need to look at in his camp. As for Tyson Fury, the sky's the limit. Set up the unification fight versus the winner, and apparently Anthony Joshua has exercised his rematch clause against Alexander Usyk. So until the next time, this is our review of Fury Wilder 3, and this is Chin Check Radio signing out.